Okay, bon, ben, bienvenue tout le monde. Welcome everyone to this last panel of four, where we bring artists from Five Foundation's current exhibition, Relations, Diaspora, and Painting, together with a special guest moderator. My name is Cheryl Sim. I'm the managing director and curator, and it's wonderful to see you all, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're absolutely delighted to have with us the artists Barty Kerr, Morija Kitenge Banza, and Salman Tour. I would also like to thank art historian, curator, and poet Mojen Bezadi for agreeing to moderate this panel with the conceiving of a set of very engaging questions. Merci infiniment à tout le monde d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. Let's begin by acknowledging that the Five Foundation is located on unceded Indigenous territory. The Ganegahaga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today, and Jojage, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationship with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Nous aimerions commencer par reconnaître que la Fondation Phi est située en territoire autochtone, lequel n'a jamais été cédé. Nous reconnaissons la nation Kanien'kehá:ka comme gardienne des terres et des eaux sur lesquelles nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui. Tiohtià:ke, Montréal, est historiquement connu comme un lieu de rassemblement pour de nombreuses Premières Nations et aujourd'hui une population autochtone diversifiée ainsi que d'autres peuples y résident. C'est dans le respect des liens avec le passé, le présent et l'avenir que nous reconnaissons les relations continues entre les peuples autochtones et autres personnes de la communauté montréalaise. So the way this event will roll out is that we'll start with a conversation based around Mojan's questions for about an hour, and then we'll invite our esteemed colleague, Rehab Essay in Toronto, to facilitate a question and answer period where we will welcome you to pose your questions in the chat box. So without any further delay, I turn it over to Barty, Salman, Morija, and Mojan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start by briefly introducing our artists before going right into the questions. And just before that, I want to thank the Five Foundation, Cheryl, Victoria, Dahlia, Rehab. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. Barty Kerr, who joins us today from London. So she has a painting in the show, two paintings actually, that present, they're kind of monumental, they're very big, that consist of a repetition of thousands of bindis, these symbolic third eyes that are activated and looking back at you. Morija, who joins us today from Montreal, is presenting paintings from his Chiromancie series that are maps made of an exercise of self-palmistry, where he reads the lines of his hand and begins a journey of map making that stems from a stream of consciousness. Salman Tour presents, it shows a painting called Group in the show, which consists of a group of individuals standing before a table waiting for a verdict from us, the viewer, who are put into the position of who we imagine to be border control agents who have the authority to decide whether to grant them access to cross the borders. So these are the paintings of our three panelists today that are in this show. And the first question that I would like to begin with is, how does your experience of diaspora, its particular imprint on our consciousness, manifest itself in your painting practices through the components of in your work, or how you approach painting as a medium? In other words, how does your fluid experience of identity intersect with the decisions you make in your practice. You can choose whoever begins first.
Anyone?
Yeah.
All right, I'll go first then.
Okay.
So I guess I'm going to speak from the point of view of the painting that is in the show. And for me, I guess to answer that question is a kind of diaspora means to me, and the feeling of it is a movement, and the way that it relates to painting is a movement between, and I do figurative painting. It's a painting that is full of distortions. It's totally imaginary. And because I have been looking for years and years at art history and wanting to be an academic painter before I ever painted like this, there is a lot of material that I'm thinking about that sort of usually displays itself out in the paintings. And for me, regarding diaspora as a movement, through fashion and physiognomy and a sense of texture and touch in the painting, as a movement between familiarity and otherness at the same time. The familiarity of a culture that is left behind, that you might stay, in a person's mind as it was always, never evolving, and maybe the changing nature of the adoptive culture. And so I usually like to do this through mixing the tropes of costume and fashion, types of people, to create, to confuse those tropes and create a kind of hybrid. This is sort of because I feel like part of being maybe in a diasporic state is to make these like instant decisions, like to maneuver constantly, and constantly keeping up with the culture that is left behind, also the culture that is adoptive, and like seeing the culture from far away and being in it at the same time. I use memory to kind of reinvent the past. The past is sometimes present in the paintings. For instance, the painting in the show that we have, I kind of made like a decision that I wanted to paint something, a guy in a hat with a plume in it, even though that's not really, that was like outside of the kind of it's group of people that I was thinking about. And I was thinking, because I was thinking about images of and tropes of what poor foreign people of color look like. What do we think of those tropes all over the world, not just within the borders of the free world? So I guess like those are some of the ways in which I was thinking about diaspora when I was doing this painting, and also just being a kind of a product of a different colonial experience coming from South Asia. I didn't move to the United States until 2002, right after 9/11. Lucky me. But the painting is also a way of owning the sort of almost racist views left by the colonial experience in South Asia, and sort of embracing comments from like literature and through and in painting by creating tubular sort of hairy forms of bodies of color that inhabit very bourgeois spaces um, in my imagination, and then in the painting as well. And I think the reason that makes it exciting for me um, is that it's new. We're still not used to it. Even I'm not used to it. And another reason that brings the the sort of chat about diaspora into the painting is that I'd like to think of the figures as cobbled together, made of different parts, and not really knowing who they are anymore. I like that they're funny and they're foolish, and it's a general idea. I mean, it stemmed from the idea of the process of immigration, but really it's an idea of self-presentation. I feel like diaspora also present, like groups present themselves they like to present themselves in a changing way to the culture that has adopted them. And so this idea that this sort of group of people sort of presents themselves, and like it's almost like I like the idea that they should ask what should be done with you, like, why are you here? You've come to my door. What do you want?
And you sometimes you have other paintings in which we see them a group sideways, right? Too.
Yeah.
Showing those different perspectives of analysis.
It's emotional as well as, well, but it's also decorative and aesthetic. I like that, it's almost at a certain point they become like a still life. And, for me, creating costumes and gestures around the people is kind of like garnishing. It's fun, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So the faces of the groups go through a lot of renovation. Sometimes, I get what I want instantly, and other times I don't. And, the reasons for those are these slight differences between what looks sympathetic, what is funny, what is below the belt. And those are real social lines that are sometimes crossed and sometimes just approached. So, and I sort of try to gather all of that through the idea of diaspora and painting.
Thank you. That's great. Who would like to go next?
Okay, so I was born in the UK, and I lived here for like 22, 23 years of my life, and I went to India in 1992. So in a sense, I'm almost a kind of reverse diaspora in some ways. And I think that fundamentally it has shaped the way that I make work and how I approach art making. It's the idea of diaspora is sort of inextricably linked to the idea for me of the body, and this idea of time and space and the body's place in time. It's also about the idea of rupture, of breaking space, of breaking place. And this idea of proliferation then of the idea, which was what you see, say, in the repetition in the way that I make the bindi works, this proliferation of time, space, moment. So something like the work in this exhibition, it's called Speaking in Tongues. It's a sort of, I'm trying to talk about miscommunications, slippages, this idea of arriving and not quite arriving, speaking and not being understood, speaking in a language of a code, which is what the bindi works are really about. It's a system, it's a language that I've created for myself and my own practice. That is a language, it's a code that sort of manifests itself constantly. So it changes its own language in the way that perhaps I do as a person, because I think as someone who moves between two cultures or two spaces, you're constantly reinventing yourself and who you are. I think that is both wonderful and it's a great freedom. And I tend to not think of it negatively. I always see myself as someone who is able to benefit and to celebrate this idea of being from another place, because what my eyes see, I always feel that other people don't see them. I am able to hear in tongue. So for me, this obviously, like as I said, the work Speaking in Tongues is very much about how I look at the bindi paintings as one part of the language of my practice. And in terms of just how, I mean, I don't only work in painting, and actually in some ways the bindi works are they painting? Are they sculpture? They are composed of the ready-made. They are flat, two-dimensional, but also quite three-dimensional, the way that I build up the works. So they are sort of fluid, and I always look at them as painting sculptures. And this sort of very fine line between, and for me, it's really just about making. So my practice is quite fluid. I think I move as easily between two-dimensional, three-dimensional photography. And for me, they're all equally relevant in the process of perhaps making. this, yeah, I mean, identity, it's a really big word. And
yeah, for sure.
and I have always liked this idea of the hybrid identity. And it's something that I've actually quite celebrated in my work in terms of the way that I make sculpture and the way that I do body castings that are memories or parts of one person. Then I will take the body of another person and I'll put them together. And then I will take the references of my own Bindi works and put that in there. And then I'll bring something that's especially relevant to archaeology in European civilizations, and I'll bring it in. And then I'll bring something that's very specific to Indian mythologies, and I'll bring it in. So for me, the idea of hybridity is really the language of diaspora. It's the melting pot of many things, many people, many languages. It makes the world interesting, I think.
Completely. And it's amazing to come from this place of plenty, because it's also easy to, feel the other way, where it's like, I'm not quite neither here or there, or feeling never quite fitting into. I have a similar experience to my Persian roots, where they don't consider me Persian if I go there. And so it's amazing to have that richness and that depth be the perspective,
Yeah, because you are everywhere. And I also find the idea of authenticity absolutely ridiculous and totally uninteresting. And I think that what makes us really, gives us gravitas, gives us something to say, is our difference. It's not what makes us the same.
Yeah.
I think we have to learn, and especially now, I think what the world perhaps we need to look at is the fact that our difference is what makes us more interesting and what brings us together, not the sameness of us. That's what makes us uniquely human, I suppose.
Thank you. Marija?
Oh, and from my experience, I think so. I'm born in Congo, and before I came here, I was living in France, and I think so. I lived 9 years in France. After now I think so. I have a 9 year here in Canada, and in my work, I think so. It's a many question. The first is how I can still local, because I'm born in Congo. I grew up in Congo. When I live in Congo. I have 23, and I'm from the family where the parent was very political, and I learned to be in French. You say nationalist, or saying then you need to fight for your country,
Patriotic.
and you need to fight for your land. You need that the way I grow up. And I'm fighting myself to stay local, but I'm not local again, because I'm global now. I live in Canada, and I'm not in Congo again, but I'm fighting to be Congolese in my work, because that's why in my work I'm talking about the land every time, and many ways I'm talking about the land. And I think so for me, it's becoming my work in my different medium to talk about how I can imagine, no, to have the power to imagine my own land, not the land from the colonization, because I'm born in the Congo, but the Congo I was born is not the same Congo before the European coming in Africa. And I think so the Congo is the creation of the European. It's not the creation of about people from this land to decide to be Congo. And every that question, it's come in my work in different ways. And I think so until today, that's why when I was speaking with Mojan, I was telling, I think so my art is the only place I have the power to decide to make my own land with my own imagination, because I know it's very nice. It's very interesting for me to meet some people, all the culture, to share the difference. But inside of me, I need to stay local. That's my own problem. And in my that why the way I can say my experience like the diaspora, it's to fighting with myself every time. I don't know why, but maybe I think so. It's because of my education and the, to feel like if I stay longer here, if I stay longer open to all I see, maybe I will lose something. And I know something you need to lose something because you become another person. But for me, that the way I can say how the thing about the diaspora working in my work and in me every day.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, and I like this way that you describe yourself. What's the French word you use? Like map maker, un pourvoyeur. No, what is the word that you use? Like you make yourself the geographer of your world.
Yeah. Exactly. Because when I was when I was in Congo, we learn they discover us. I think so, like people from another country, in many countries in the world, the European discover us. It took me the time to see they don't discover us, they meet us, but they say they discover us. And they design the map of the world, how we can move in the world, how we can live in the world. They say, this is your space now. And I took this power to say, in my work, I need to be the person who decide where is the space where my body can move, my body can live. And I think so the diaspora for me too is like the physical rupture, the physical break with the land, because you are not again in the same land you're born. It's a physical break, because for the food, it's easy to find the food. It's for the language, it's easy to call people to speak with your language. But how your body is moving on the space is not the same again, because you're moving in the new space. Mm-hmm. And the reality of this new space teach you many things, and it teach you how you create your relation with other. And how I think so for many artists, if you ask many artists from Africa, the first time they came in Europe, they're gonna tell you, oh, it was the first time I understand I was black. And that it's not, for me, it's not you don't know you are black, but because you live in the same place, people are like you, people speak the same language like you, they eat the same food. You don't ask this question. But the diaspora gave me this. I don't know if I can get the opportunity, but give me this. They show me how I need to fight with myself. Sometimes I'm fighting with myself, but I'm fighting with order to say, I'm in the singularity in the global. I'm just not the generality that I can say. That's why I say in my work, I decide to take this power, decide what I can drawing, what space I can imagine for me and from my own perspective.
Yeah, and this question of taking the power, I think, leads me really well to the next question I have for you, which is that each of your painting practices, to me, when I've been looking and studying them, convey a palpable sense of resilience and of tenacity, of agency. The plurality of cultures that you navigate and the continued culture of imperialism in the West have a particular toll on a racialized body. Would you say that your work can function as a space of liberation? If so, how?
Anyone?
You're always first now.
Well, for me, I think liberation, it's being in the studio is kind of selfish. It's about my liberation. and I'm, not really thinking, I guess, on a communal level. And what I find liberating is by fracturing the kind of emotive parts of traumatic experience or memory into or the mistranslations and the inability to translate across cultures. So the way that I do it is that I turn that kind of experience into an aesthetic experience, and that really helps me. And because the paintings are narrative based, I find a kind of freedom in reinventing my past, reimagining it. It's autobiography. I feel like things that I may not, like the narratives that I'm thinking about, in which I am, I'm not in control. I gain control in some way and create meaning actually where there is lack thereof. Um, and to try to create a linear thread through this kind of labyrinth of like memory, and to feel more in control of it. Um, and a lot of it is done through the lens of art history, through contemporary advertisement. Um, I live in an urban center where people are on, streaming their lives and their aesthetic, their lifestyles on Instagram, which, I live through Instagram. I think that if that didn't exist, I don't think, the Whitney would have even ever looked at my work. So, just scrolling into people's lives and discovering these like new cultures that are emerging, that are progressive, that are exportable to different parts of the world. And at the same time, looking at the world through art historical lens and like really believing that the past is present now, and that the future is not, it's not a turning away from the past. Actually, it's all sutured together in a weird way. So bringing the past in the present really, it gives me some sort of peace, and it also creates a link in my adoptive culture, which historically, I think the hordes of cultural artifacts in the museums here are of imperialist, elite Europeans, I didn't find it um, like a painful experience or any contradiction in wanting to paint, for instance, like to learn from European masters who were, might have had very different ideas from us about how the world works, and a hierarchy of power. And it's a kind of, I feel like it's a dialogue between someone like me who's adopted this culture, which is, which has purported itself to be a kind of world culture, an example of what, tolerance and progressiveness can be, and to suture my stories with um, the stories, that are a part of the way that the culture looks at the world, has looked at it historically, and now in a very changed way. Um, so, there's the idea of what is dignified, what, how are people kind of humiliated, and my kind of work moves in between those two things. How is, how do people like own that power, and how fragile that is when we haven't gone far enough into the future to have building blocks of a multi-ethnic elite in this region of the world that has contributed as much to the story of progress, as some of the cultures that, enslaved other cultures before. So, those stories, the historical stories that I've looked at, they're pagan, they're religious stories, primarily Christian. Some of them are, also from the miniature Persian and South Asian tradition. Um, and mythology of urban centers and industrialized cities of the West. To bring those very disparate things together in an imaginative way, on impulse, sometimes on a whim, which sometimes works and doesn't work, that's where I kind of find my freedom and liberation through painting.
Yeah, thank you. Barty.
I think, okay, so some of the smallest works that I've been making in the past 3 or 4 years have been the map works, and I showed them in Montreal in the P Foundation.
Yeah.
And when I started making the works, originally way back in 2002, I was actually researching this idea of the Great Arc Survey of India and how geodesy had changed the colonial power structure in India through marking territory and naming places. And what I saw, and I mean what we know, was that imperialism was an aggressive European trajectory that marched across great swathes of land outside Europe to basically map and to colonize and to mark and to somehow look at places that had been hitherto and in the past always been about oral cultures, and where mountains and rivers were marked as poetries or as mother figures or goddesses. And so this idea for me that when I started looking at maps was to really to try and reclaim them in such a way, and to bring them and take them back to this language of poetic resonance in some ways. Interestingly, when I was looking at old maps, and this is all my sort of nerdy stuff. I mean, in India, it's actually illegal to own a map or import a map into the country that has inaccurate borders with our neighbors. So contested sites such as Kashmir, East Pakistan, these are actually cognizable offenses in India today still. I found that, I mean, I've imported maps into India and they have been stopped at customs and they have not got through because their borders are inaccurate. So the idea of border, the idea of map making is as old as, actually the first maps were made in 2000 BC. Okay, the Chinese were the first who made the first maps because they invented the magnetic compass, which was made out of this fantastic stone called lodestone. And it was a sort of natural magnetic material. And they were using navigation techniques as early as 1041 or sort of 1050. I've learned a lot about maps purely because I love them. And I'm increasingly moving to this idea of star mapping, and in my own work, and stargazing, because it sort of gives me an extra dimension of time space. So it's also as interesting as it is to look down into the spaces around us and the places that we walk and the places that we map with our own feet, and this idea of repetition, and the spaces that we create with our bodies through ritual, through our own daily lives, through our walking, through our traveling. Sometimes I'm sort of now increasingly moving towards this idea of liberating myself from that space, from the very physicality of the map, out into something that's much bigger. That's perhaps back to the idea of poetry. And for me, the Mindis work very well because obviously it's a language and a code that I can manipulate in some ways and create an abstraction of pattern, of language, so they can become signs. They are topographical, they're about journeys, they're like markers. I think that this idea of this idea of imperialism in the West is a space of incredible duality now, perhaps more so now than ever. And the world is really looking and trying to retrace, I believe, some of the steps that they've taken in the past. And you can see this specifically now with countries like France, who are doing really, really interesting repatriations. You have the Benin bronzes that are massively contested now. And there are histories that are really being rewritten, and they are being rewritten through the tongue and through the histories or through the writings of people who live from their own countries. So it's I think sometimes when I make my own work, I'm deeply interested in history, also geographies and the way that we have sort of traversed. You look at, there are Indian people in almost every country in the world. They have moved almost everywhere and made homes and settled and created their own languages and their own communities. But at the same time, there is always a sense of home. And so I think in my practice, I'm not specifically always trying to answer those questions. Most of the time I'm actually asking them, because I don't actually have the answers myself. So there's a very strong duality in the practice that I make, even in terms of the way that I make art. I'm both an abstract artist and a figurative artist. There's a lot of positive, negative. I look inside objects as well as outside of them. I refer both to the masculine and the feminine, and very often the duality of those, which is the in-between space. I'm interested in this thing of the outer skin, the skin of the other, the inner skin of something. So I constantly play with this duality of meaning and message.
And consciousness.
yeah. And are we here? Yeah. And what is consciousness? And what is the cerebral brain? And what is the left side of the brain? And what is the right side of the brain? What is the inner self? And what is the outer self? Who are we at different times? It's a marriage between science and the soul. Is there a meeting? Yes, there's a meeting. Of course there is.
Thank you. Marija.
Yes, like Barty, I love map. I don't know why, but
yeah, me too.
It's very beautiful to look when I was studying to the cultural political. I was in comment tu dis stage en anglais?
An internship.
Yes, an internship in Switzerland, in the UN, and I was looking every old map.
Yeah.
I was using from different side of war in the world. They have many maps from Africa, from different area of the world. And for me, I think so. To talk about the space of liberation, I think so. For me, maybe I'm very egoist, selfish. Maybe first I'm very selfish, because for me it's first my own space of liberation. Because sometimes I give the example to say, when I have 16 in Kinshasa in Congo, my problem was to think how we can fight with Belgium, with France, with USA, with London, how we can fight with them, because they come in our country to steal gold, to steal many things, and we are poor. They put us many war in our land. But in the same time, my cousin was living in Belgium. He was not fighting, because he was fighting to say I need representation of me on TV. I need representation of myself on. I need people. I don't like, again, racism. It was not the same fight for the same people. But now I live here in Canada. I have a two fight, because I'm still, like what I was saying first, I'm still linked with my first land, Congo, and I'm still fighting about how Canadian enterprise going to Congo for mining, and many children was killed for the war. I'm still fighting with that, and again here locally, I'm fighting about racism, and it's like the chiromancy and all of my work. It became first for me the space of liberation, the only space I can win this fight, because of in the reality it's very difficult for me to win this fight, because you have many things coming. You need to have money, you need to have many relation in politics, and you have many layers of meaning, many layers of power you need to have for to win this fighting. And the only space I can take the time to say, here I have a power, here I can win this war, I can decide how to change the way the space is exist. I can to change how the way I can move on this space. It become mental, and it become sometimes like the research about myself. And that's why I was speaking with for one of my friends, tell me, in every work you do, in the end, we're talking about space. We're talking about land. We're talking about how they stole your land, how they steal, stealing your land, how they still fighting. But now I'm Canadian. I'm Canadian citizen, and now it's very difficult for me, because all of this company going to Congo, of mining company going to Congo, now they work for me too, because I'm Canadian too, but I'm still Congolese. And it's like you need to fight between of both. And when you look how they thinking space again about the land, actually we still have war in Congo, and the part where every people now we have me too, I have my best cell phone because the battery is very good, but this product from help us to have a good battery about our cell phone, our computer. It's one of these product from of my country, but I'm still fighting with every that to say they need to took this part of the land to put the disaster on this land for to steal something. But I can fight, I can win this war. And the only space I can win the war is to talking about this in my work, but to talking about the very comment tu dis, intelligently. Yes. Yeah. To talking about the very, very intelligently for people to understand what that meaning to be colonized, and what that meaning to decolonize yourself. That another work you need to do to decolonize yourself. And after you decolonize yourself, sometimes you be afraid to say, oh, if I'm decolonizing myself, but they teaching me a lot of things, and what can I do now? And that's why my work is still like the safe space for me, the space of liberation, because outside of in the reality, I have a many fighting, but in my work, I'm coming with different, not decision, solution for me, but I don't know if it's working for other people.
Yeah.
Yes,
you have to start with yourself.
Yes, exactly. That's why I was saying in the beginning, I'm very selfish, because I'm thinking first for me, and I say maybe it's gonna help some people to understand something. Maybe not, but maybe it's gonna take the time for these people to understand and to find the way they can have liberation, the way they can, because I think so. Some people have the process. We can don't have the same process in the same time.
Yeah.
It's like when I'm talking with my brother and my sisters, they still live in Congo. Something when I talk with them about the decolonization, they're asking me, what thing you going decolonization for what? You know, it's like they are not in the same process with me, because I'm doing the process. I'm starting to doing the process when I was in Europe, and I'm still doing the process here. And in Europe and Canada, it's not the same thing. The area, it's not the same. The problematic, it's not the same, but it's still the country doing colonization. But Europe doing colonization in Africa, but the European coming in Canada, they doing colonization in the land, in the same space. And I'm coming with my story, with many layers, and that's why in my work in chiromancy, you're gonna see I'm putting many layer of map. It's like to talking about of this this different layer come with different story.
Yeah. And all of you talk about the body and the sort of how the body carries these stories, and it becomes really important in, I think, each of your work. And in a context of COVID, where we're hearing, you know, important reports that are talking about how racialized bodies are disproportionately affected, and we wonder why. You know, I have a small quote from a Claudia Rankine poem that I was reading just yesterday, and I think it really resonates with what all of you just said, that I think I'm just going to read because it was really pretty palpable for me in your work. She describes these microaggressions that happen in her daily life, and this is like following one microaggression. She says, quote, "When you arrive in your driveway and turn the car off, you remain behind the wheel another 10 minutes. You fear the night is being locked in and coded on a cellular level and want time to function as a power wash. Sitting there, staring at the closed garage door, you're reminded that a friend once told you there exists a medical term, John Henryism, for people exposed to stresses stemming from racism. They achieve themselves to death trying to dodge the buildup of erasure. Sherman James, the researcher who came up with the term, claimed the physiological costs were high. You hope by sitting in silence, you are bucking the trend." And I feel like in your work, you are bucking the trend. In this trend, it gives you that agency and that remedying of the body from all of the tolls of not just your generation, but the generations prior to you who are coded in your genetic makeup. Just wanted to make a little parenthesis. It felt so relevant. But I'm going to pass to the third and final question before we take questions, which is popular culture, the ready-made, the mediated world, art historical references are in each of the presented works at the Phi Foundation that you are showing. How are references and citations linked to plurality of cultures you're navigating through it? I think we've touched on it a little bit, but I think we can maybe expand a little bit on that. If you can illustrate with some references, that would be great. And if you can also talk about how that's connected possibly to appropriations and assumptions from the West.
All right, I'll go. I can share my screen. I luckily have a slideshow open right here, so. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just go through just a couple of images. This is an image. Sorry, I need to like remove this sidebar somehow. Oh, there. This is the image of the painting in the show, and these are just some kind of related images. And I, was planning to be an academic painter. I didn't really like contemporary art about like 10, 15 years ago. I just wanted to go to like museums. Excuse me, sorry, this ambulance has to pass by right now.
New York City.
So I'm just discovering the pleasures of living on 14th Street. So, I used to go to London, to the National Gallery, the Met here, to just like seek out the like painters. I just wanted to be an art historian. So I looked for years and years at painters like the more known ones like Rubens and Van Dyck, and then, Bernardo Strozzi, and just like a whole array of painters that inform the academic practice. Like, and, there are Instagram accounts that are like filled with painting that is not concerned with, uh, the kind of moral or current direction of contemporary art at the moment. I wanted to be an apprentice in that way, and I was for about 10 years. And so it was, I learned so much about creating the aesthetic experience, about using kind of paint, costume, directing, giving pictures a moral direction. But then eventually when I started breaking out of that practice of using pictures and models and just painting imaginatively, um, through imagination, I mean, a lot of different things that I was looking at was pouring into the work, and I think mainly for me it would be advertisement of the new kind of how should I say, urban civilized brown person, and the lifestyles and the images that go with it. My studio is in Bushwick in Brooklyn, which is a culture which prides itself on being sort of like avant-garde. It's crazy. Every day is a little bit like Halloween, and like people are beyond, consider themselves beyond gender and race. And,
Yeah.
some of it is true and some of it isn't true, and there's a whole host of like trappings of environments that these kinds of people inhabit. They work in advertisement, they're writers, they're painters, um, and they borrow freely from art history. You might see someone walking, in like a top hat, and someone else kind of walking a turban, like, right, just, and it's very free, at least on an aesthetic level, and it's a very good environment for a painter like me to be in, and so that kind of bled into a lot of my work, so that um, these almost guessing games, I like, by dressing up people almost like in dolls costumes, of who is what is the costume of a liberated, maybe westernized person, and what is the costume of someone religious, and what if someone's gay, or like someone who sort of grew up like an effeminate man, and like how do we see that, but also the idea to mix all of it up, everything from like a Parisian tramp to like a Robert Mapplethorpe's like leather jackets, to like costume, Indian sort of costumes during the British Raj. um, those are all, they contain signals of dignity, of what is revered, what's holy, and what has been absorbed into Western culture and what still remains on the outside. Um, so those are some of the kind of references that build up the textures and colors in the paintings. Um, so I guess, yeah, I guess like I borrow freely, and I think that in itself is a privilege to be able to do. Yeah, I'm gonna close this now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Barty.
So, talk of the role of popular culture. I think I've been using the ready-made in my work for many years, and I think I do that because the ready-made has an inherent narrative and history all of its own. I use many secondhand and old objects because I like the idea that a chair or something that's belonged to you once and now that comes into my artwork, whether it's a piece of your clothing or it's a staircase, has a history and a narrative that predates me. And with the inherent object, there's a value. And I think that my work is essentially about a series of narrations. And you have to, when I try to make work, I want to turn things around and change the things that you think you know about it. Material is inherently passive, I think, until you activate it. Certainly in the realm of making art for me, and yes, all material has its own inherent property in life, but when you push it to become something else, that's when either poetry or transformation happens in the way that you receive something new. And for me, that itself is a radical intervention. It's a freedom and a liberation of the object and of the way that you actually see things. I want my narratives to be quite difficult sometimes. I want them to be surprising. I want to be unsure of them myself. I don't want to know who my sculptures are. I don't want to know what my artwork is. I want to, and I see that as a good sign when I walk away completely confused by my own work. And a lot of the time when I am confused by my own work, I just break it. And that's when rupture happens, especially in things like sculpture. I break things in the studio quite a lot. To break them is often just to open them up or to cut them open in half or turn them inside out. And I often do that just to know them better. It's almost like a punk manifestation. It's like, if you don't understand it, break it. If you don't know what it looks like on the outside, have a look at what it looks like on the inside. Perhaps the inside is going to reveal itself to you to be somebody else, to be something else that you couldn't possibly even imagine that thing to be. And I like to look at art as a narrative that has incredible potential of energies, and it's very, very powerful in the way that animals, or that skins of animals, can be shamanistic, and I can give, say, if I make a goddess or something, I can give her speed if she carries the skin of a deer, for instance. I want you to carry with you the metaphor of everything that you know, and to bring your stories to my work. But at the same time, I want you to be a little bit confused by it. And so that's where there's this, like I said before, there's a slippage in the way that you experience it or you see it. There's so many things as artists that we can tap into. And it's like what Salman was saying, we tap into our art history. We tap into all the painters and the artists that we love, whether they are from our own culture or from another. I mean, when I make the Bindi works, I'm thinking about Liechtenstein. I'm looking at Jasper John's target paintings, but I'm also looking at temple structures, and I'm looking at tantric paintings. I'm looking at Indian miniature. The world is somehow, we are a very privileged generation. The way that we can access images now is just so extraordinary that it almost seems unbelievable that we are looking and seeing and experiencing so much a day. I mean, I love this idea when people say, I don't know how to see art, I don't know how to look at it. And I always say to them, your eyes, they process 75 images a second, 4,500 a minute, 270,000 images an hour, and 6.48 million frames a day. You know how to see. Your body knows how to see, because it's almost doing this automatically, intrinsically. I just think that that art somehow is an extraordinarily complex form of communication, and we are equally complex humans. All of us, every single one of us on this panel, has a completely different trajectory and a different life, and we're all somehow we are connected by something that's extraordinarily similar. We all are fighting. We're fighting with our two sides. We're fighting with our two brains. We're fighting with the positive and the negative. And sometimes I think through my work, I try to really embrace that duality, the two people that I am in the studio as an artist, as a practitioner. And I just sort of think that maybe, and as much help as I can get from all the other artists in the past and all my contemporaries now. And Salman, if I see something in your work that I like, or a piece of clothing, I'm taking it, you know, and I'm going to be like, oh, I like that. And the same as you, I'm a bit of a magpie. So it's just, I just pick and choose and collect and amalgamate objects, and everything sort of sits around me in the studio until it's ready to be activated and made into something else.
Amazing. Thank you. Marija?
They give the answer for me too.
Yeah.
No, I will say it's you know, like Salmon. I'm from the academic school, you know, painting, like you need to doing La Joconde like La Joconde. You need to doing Le Titien like Le Titien. That's the first painting I was doing at school until I'm going to France, because when I finished my school in Kinshasa, it was if you need to have a success at school, you need to doing La Joconde better than Leonardo da Vinci. That your teacher tell you, oh, you are a good painter. That's very nice. And in France, when I came in France, it was the school like contemporary art, like you don't touch painting. If you touch painting, it's like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
Doing painting, we don't doing painting again. It's finished. You need. I mean, my teacher was telling me, oh, why you don't doing installation? What do you doing performance? You know, you're from Africa. In Africa, you have a rhythm and body. You can doing performance. I was like saying, no, I like painting. It took me, I think, so 3 years. Every year, my teacher was telling me, you need to just left painting. You need to doing another thing. And I discover of myself, you can doing painting contemporary. You can make painting different. And the popular culture come to me in different work in different way. It's not the same for different installation, painting or photo. It's very, very different. And I watch TV every time. I'm not reading too much. Maybe if I have just doing research, I'm gonna reading. But I'm watching TV every time, and I'm watching movie every time. That's why from my curiosity, like if I can say I took something of the cultural popular culture, like my curiosity, I made that like the episode of the TV show. I decide like this is the season 1 and with different episode. This is the season 2 with different episode. And inside of that, like you, but yeah, I'm going to take something. I love many geometric decoration stuff from India, from Middle East, and from different ethnies in Congo. And like the first when I discover the aîné, I don't know how you say that in English.
The elder.
The aîné, it's like you drawing like
sorry, the in. Yeah, I think it's henna, no?
In.
Yes, henna. Yes, yeah. When I discovered that the first in my life, it was in France, I was like, oh, it's very nice, it's very thing. And I think so 4 years after, when I'm starting to doing curomancy, and the first drawing was like, oh, it's like the henna I was sewing first 4 years ago. You know, it's becoming in different time, in different way. Maybe I'm gonna speaking with someone, you're gonna tell me about something, and it took me 1 year, and after that it's becoming in my work. Many times it's not coming quickly the same day. It's coming very, very late in my work. Like for chiromancy, I'm reading a lot about how they cut different area of in the world. Like I was watching the movie last year, I think so, about how they cut India and Pakistan, the decision, the politic decision. You know, like this. It's I'm looking about many things about that, how they decide to give the land, how they decide to take this land, how different war in the world change the geopolitics about different space. And for curiosity, I think so that the place I take many things for to construct my work. It's not many, it's not I think I work a lot like an academic painter. With curiosity, it's like I'm free to doing something. I'm not doing again the painting like the painting like I was doing first, because like for curiosity, that just this year I'm using again acrylic in canvas. It was a long time I'm not using again acrylic in canvas. And actually I'm looking again the painting, but not for the shape, but for to looking this the color, the way they play with comment tu dis ombre encore en anglais?
Shadow.
Yeah. Well, like the play with shadow and light. And it's like it took me the time to come back in my basic I learned at school, but to looking everything in different. And when I was visit the exhibition to see your work, the different work, I was happy because I say, oh, I saw it's like in the different, for different artists, I saw different time of my learning of painting, different time of learning of my work at school. And it was very interesting because every dose of different thing to do in painting was with the similarity about the diaspora, the similarity of it about again this different story from different perspective about different identities and from the different territory again, you know, that the way I was. And it teach me a lot about that. And that, yes, like I was saying before, I think so they told everything I was thinking to me to my work too. And it was very interesting to see this exhibition and this work.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have to take questions now. We've exceeded our time a little bit. So I'll give the stage to you, Riyadh.
Thank you. Well, we have one question, right? I don't know if you can hear me well. Or
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry, I wasn't sure. So I have one question from Paul. You've all spoken about the memory in passing. I was wondering how you understand the persistence of memory in yourself, in your work. Memory is still manifesting itself as a living being coexistent with you. So that's for all of you, if you could answer that. I guess, yeah. Salman, it's already spotlight on you. Would you like to comment on it?
As I guess, you know, the way that it, I guess, manifests in my work is that, you know, it is emotionally, you know, like the past is always present. And it's I think of the past as a place where I can, like, you know, pick up from. I don't think of it as a physical kind of jelly floating like in my space, for sure. I think for me, it's a place where from where I can make fantasies about the future, and create that kind of motor to move forward. And the past is also a place of trauma and painful sort of memories. So for me, especially, you know, having grown up as like an effeminate kind of young man in a very macho culture, very gendered, and yeah, so having the memory of processing that, but also having found my community very early on, those are the places in the past that are kind of ever present for me. But I don't think of memory as a as a physical being. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think in my work I use the body as a form of as a very palpable way of holding this idea of memory as almost a material. So casting is something that I've been doing for about 15 years, and I cast quite regularly. And sometimes they're friends or sometimes they're people I know. A project that I did recently, I mean, actually not even that recently, but it took me about 3 years to do, from 2012 to 2015. I did a series of castings of 6 female sex workers from Sonagachi in Calcutta, which is the largest red light area. And the work was very difficult, but it was also ethically and morally, and it was contentious. But I think what I really was looking at was the idea as the body and the skin and the essence of the skin, and somehow materials such as plaster catching or capturing the very essence of the body. I mean, plaster is and I think what I'm trying to do in my work is bring together this idea, a psychological idea or a philosophical concept, and somehow activate material to somehow support that idea. So plaster is a really, really old material. It dates back to the Egyptians, who believed that they would use plaster to make death masks. And they believed that the soul of the dead was somehow transported into a mask. And plaster is really interesting because when it touches your body, it heats up your skin, and the pores of your skin somehow open. And I was just, it's actually a really beautiful and very cathartic process. And it's also very, very physical. And I wanted to somehow use plaster as the material to take the imprint and the memory of a body, but also then to make that the finished artwork. To present it as the memory, the essence, the very first cast of a woman who was a sex worker. So I that's just one project that I did, and I do many castings. So memory, I've recently cast my mother, and also my father, and members of my family, also as a way to in some way hold them, and to I like the idea of the activation of material. It's really, and it's almost for me alchemical. There is magic in material, and it is capable and has the possibilities of a great many things.
Wonderful. I'd like to ask you a bit more question in that case, because I remember that series that was placed. We showed it at the time. It was called DHC on the fourth floor, and I don't know. From my memory, they were also on these wooden stands, but that had wheels. They were completely unstable. I'm kind of curious about that also in that case.
You said they were unstable.
Well, I remember they were on
wheels,
pieces of wood, but they were on wheels, and having the plaster on wheel and the heaviness of it. But like every movement in space, they always moved a tiny bit. So I'm kind of curious of the choice of them.
I wanted to keep them almost as very traditional portraiture, to almost have them as studio, to make them look like literally they had just come out of the studio. And so in my studio, to be honest, everything's on wheels because everything is so heavy, and I make little trolleys. And so obviously when I put them there, I realized after a while that this was sort of slightly serendipitous in the way that it just worked, and it was a way for me to control to kind of lift them off the floor, to give them a kind of an elevation, but not put them on a plinth, because the work didn't ask for a plinth. The nature of the work was not the type of thing that one would then elevate and celebrate. But then how do you lift something off the floor? So these are sometimes questions that they are practical, but they're also conceptual. And so I'm sort of grappling with many layers in the works, and sometimes things just happen kind of by accident and I go with it. But with these works, I was very aware that they did not require a traditional plinth. As much as I love making plinths, it's actually one of my favorite things to do. And they didn't require a plinth, but I had to pick them up. It wasn't the kind of sculpture that could be rooted to the floor. I had to lift it away from the groundedness of the work, because the work was so serious in some ways that I had to float it a bit. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's sort of, for me in my head, it's sort of, I'm sort of saying, float the work, take it off my floor. Yeah.
No, it's very enlightening. I do still want to ask that question, Paul's question, to Marija. So I'll repeat it for you just in case.
No, it's okay. I understand.
Okay, cool. Go for it.
It's okay. And I think so. I don't know. The way I use memory, it's, like I was saying first, I think so because, I don't know if it's because I grew up in the place with, comment tu dis incertain?
Uncertain. Yeah, uncertain.
Yeah, I grew up in the place with, the life is very uncertain. And it's like my body and my head was learned to record something in your brain, but you don't use it, and sometimes it's come back, but you don't know the time it's gonna come back. You don't know what it's gonna wake up this memory. And that's the way for me I'm using the memory about many things. And Mojan was talking about the COVID, just about the COVID. And since March, I have many things, it's come back to me, and many things I was living in my country. And I forgot that because we stay just at home, and in the March, we don't go outside every time, we don't see people. And many things come back to it's come back to me. It's like, oh yeah, it remember me like this thing. And it gives me the possibility again to write something and to say, oh, I can doing work about this. And I can doing series about this thing. And it's how it's work and how I use memory. It's like this. It's not come back. It's not coming in the same day, in the same thing, but I need something to wake up, or the smell, the sound, the situation, and that's gonna give me the possibility to look around of me who have the same memory or the same situation like me. And it's like I'm looking someone can become like the mirror of the thing the problem or the solution. I don't know how to call that. The thing I have, I need something to become my mirror, and I can talk every question, every reflection to these people, because he have a same situation like me, and it's gonna help me to bring in my work something that's gonna be complex. And that's why I was say first, I don't know if it help people looking my work. Maybe, I don't know, because I never asking this question, but I know for me, it helped me a lot about this. And since I really told you, since about the COVID is starting, many things just come back It's like, oh, I'm sure I'm not. And sometimes I'm calling my parent to say, do you think in this time I was this problem with this? And my parents say, how do you remember about this? Because you are very young. And I said, I don't know, just because it's come back just now. And that's why, and the way I'm just looking to make research, to asking the question to people, and to looking again someone or 2, 3, or 4 people gonna come the mirror for me for to doing my project. That's the way it worked for me to using memory.
Thank you. I'm kind of curious in relationship to your work and also Bhakti. Well, if I pronounced it correctly. I'm really interested actually in the plurality of both of your work, and the switch of medium and narration in it, and finding sort of like how each mediums are really like translating each stories in the forefront. Both with Barty's ways of decorticating and cutting through the material, and your way of switching material and adapting yourself, completely shifting constantly. I'm kind of curious about that process.
I mean, I think that I've always sort of said to me, I've always said the medium is not the message. The message is the message, and you adapt to the medium. So I'm somebody who's actually I'm very comfortable working in many ways. If I don't know how to do something, I'll find out how to do it. And to be honest, I was not. I mean, unlike you, Marija, that I was not taught to be a good artist. I was trained very young to learn how to draw, and to learn how to life draw and do many things. And I had an incredible art teacher when I was a very young student, but I was also taught to make mistakes and to destroy my work and to break it and redo it and remake it. And I think part of me was a kind of revolution against my art teacher, that I was like, well, you know what, I'm not going to do this very well. So I don't really worry that much if my sculpture looks bad. If it looks poorly constructed, or if you can see the joins in it or the lines in it, because I believe that art is a construct. So I'm not interested in presenting reality in any shape or form. It's just not what I'm interested in doing. But what I am interested in is creating things that you don't know and that you don't see, and I will arrive there in any way that I can. So if it's through bronze, I'll make bronze. If it's through ready-made, I'll do it that. If I can find out about wax, I'll learn how to use that. Cement and clay and painting and bindis and whatever. I'll pretty much use anything that I can. And I think that's part of the nature of me as a person, because I'm it's just who I am. I'm quite fluid. And so I can sit here and I can sit there. I can be in India. I can be in, and I think it's just about the nature of how and who you are as a person.
I'm really happy to listen that, because every time people ask me, why you don't using this, you're using many medium using, I say yes, because the medium for me, it's like what do you say, it's like the, comment tu dis un robinet,
sink.
Yeah, it's like a sink for me. The medium, because the for me that's important is a message. It's not the medium. It's like I can decide, oh, and maybe sometime I use the same project, I use 3 medium before I decide which medium it's I think it's very good for this message. And that's why I'm so happy to listen that. And I had also one teacher, maybe malheureusement il est décédé, and he was told, he was the only teacher we have in Kinshasa, was ask us when we finish our painting, now you need to destroy your painting. That's the only teacher. It was told, but every teacher was, you need to do perfect, you need to do like Le Titien, Le Tintoret, you need, Renaissance, Italian. And when I was in Kinshasa, I don't see this painting in really time. I was so just on the book, but I need to doing this first. And like what's traveling teach me, it teach me to be just and I don't regret the formation I have in Kinshasa. It was very interesting for me. I think so in my work until today, and I learned to have this possibility to use different medium, because in France I was touching different medium. When I came in Canada, I was exchange school. I was teaching different medium. That gave me the opportunity now to know which is the basic you're gonna learn if you're going to school, very academic school, and which is the basic you learn if you're going in the school is not very academic. And it gives me all possibility, like my parent give me the different possibility to say, we're gonna give you everything, and you in your life, you're gonna just choose what is good for you to go to atteindre, comment tu dis atteindre, Jeanne?
To reach.
Yeah, to reach your objective. And for me, in my art, I have a message, I have something I need to say, I have something I need to put on the reflection for people. And like you, Batir, it's like I don't need to replicate the reality. I'm just taking the reality. I'm choosing what people don't see. I'm using the same code, like in the reality, but to show you what the thing you don't see. I'm not coming with the new code. I'm using the same code. I'm using the same way, but I need to show you, look here, you don't see that. You don't see that way. For me, this is my opinion about this. And the way to take different medium, it's very nice. You know, it's like you have this freedom to play with different medium. You don't, because I have this possibility. And that's why I was happy when you said that, because I said, oh, I found someone gonna thinking like me. Because sometimes it's very hard because you have a curator tell you the same question, and why you're using many media, why I say the creator, because like what I was say first, sometimes I'm African artist and sometimes I'm Canadian artist. I don't know if it's the same for you, for you in your artistic work. And sometimes when I meet the African curator, they ask me another question, and sometimes when I meet the European or American curator, they ask me another question. I need to navigate with this between to say, this is my work, it's gonna change, it's gonna stay like this. If you like my work, you're gonna take it like this. If you don't like my work, you don't gonna take it, just, you know. And you need to navigate between these two reality. It's not the same reality, but it's still in the same system.
Thank you. I see the time. I think we're pretty much over, and I know Salman had another appointment after.
Yes, Salman is
Very
opening a
busy.
show at the Whitney.
Yes, congratulations.
This has been absolutely incredible. I've loved this conversation, and it has been so generous, stimulating. I can't thank you all enough for this time together. Cette conversation a été vraiment incroyable, tellement généreux et stimulant. A massive thanks to Barty, Salman, Marija, Mojan, to my colleagues at the Phi Foundation. Merci beaucoup, Dalia, Victoria, Rihab, and huge deep felt thanks to all of you for joining us and taking part in today's elucidation on these incredible practices. Merci beaucoup à tous et à toutes pour votre participation et votre soutien à nos activités de la Fondation. J'aimerais bien vous serrer dans les bras. I would love to hug each and every one of you. Portez-vous bien, prenez soin de vous. Thank you so much, and take care, everyone. Let's be in touch. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Nice to meet you, Salman and Barty.
Yes, lovely meeting you all.
You are
Bye.
so
Take
wonderful.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mojan.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Night.
Thank you, guys. That was
Thank you very much.